For WWF in the Arctic, why is the Arctic important for us? Why is the Arctic important now? I'll really express that in 3 questions and use these bears as an indicator. The mama bear is climate change. Everyone knows that climate change is happening, nowhere more so than in the Arctic, where global warming is happening at about twice the global average. So it's an indisputable fact to the people and to the wildlife and to the ecosystems of the Arctic. The question for us is, how do we ensure that that fabric that I admired so much, that fabric will stay intact and resilient through the stresses in that changing climate? That's question number 1. Question number 2, the second bear, is I call it it's industry. Right? So what we might see from an ecosystem perspective as a challenge and a threat to the resilience of ecosystems is in the Arctic an opportunity for business. The disappearing ice that you'll see dramatically creates what is in effect a sea of opportunity in the Arctic for oil and gas exploration, for mining, for fishing, and for shipping. That is a reality. That development will take place. The question for us is where and under what circumstances. That's the second question that interests us. The third bear is us, and it's us collectively as Arctic peoples, as Arctic nations. What rules do we need to put in place to ensure that what is a sad record, a track record of a history of exploitation, the kind of use it or lose it mentality, and how do we turn that around into a story of responsible stewardship? What do we need to do collectively, internationally at Arctic nations to ensure that stewardship becomes a reality across the circumarctic region? That's the context. Those are the questions that really drive us, that make me look forward to getting to work in the morning. And I'm very pleased that the project you're going to hear about now really seeks in some way to address all 3 of those questions.
What you're looking at is the Arctic Ocean. It's an ocean fringed by land. These little red dots here, these are buoys that were put into the ocean to be able to track the ice movement. And the colors that you're looking at there are this big white bit, the very center of it. That's the oldest, thickest ice. You can see the scale up on the right there. That gives you an idea of how old, but also correspondingly how thick the ice is, because the older ice tends to be the thicker ice. And it goes right down to the dark blue there, which is open water. So let's just set this in motion. The Arctic is losing ice at a rate of about 11% per decade. That's the rate at which it's receding. Now what you're watching here is sort of like the beating heart of the Arctic, this rhythmic expansion and contraction of the ice. This is what drives a lot of processes in the Arctic, a lot of ecological processes, a lot of human processes that rely on those ecological processes. So as we approach the end of the animation, you'll start to notice something. Something's going wrong with the beating of this heart. You see what's happened here? See where the remnant ice is? The 9th month of 2010. Just think of what you saw at the beginning of this presentation when you saw that whole big area of white in the middle there. The same month, years earlier. So what you've been watching in slow but inexorable motion is the creation of the last ice area. So that takes us to here. This is a picture of the Arctic in 2040, in September of 2040. And again, just the white bits there are where the ice is predicted to be. The rest of it is predicted to be essentially free of ice at that time. Now this isn't some sort of wild-eyed projection. This is the scientific consensus amongst people who study climate, study sea ice. This is the consensus of where the ice will end up. And as you can see, there's a dotted line around there. That we've put around there to say, okay, this is vaguely what we consider to be the last ice area. We put it as a dotted line, not as a hard line, because there's still some research to be done. There's still some consideration to be done. We're not entirely sure. Again, we're working on projections, we're working on models. So we're not entirely sure that that's exactly where it'll be. And we don't want to draw those lines yet, because there are management considerations to that need to go into there. We need to consult with a lot of people. We need to find out a lot more about this area. But that is essentially our area of interest that's defined there. And as you'll notice, this area of immense international significance is located largely in and around Canada. So this makes this a Canadian concern. And this is why it's a concern. This is why it's a concern everywhere. This is all around the Arctic. You can see Norway, Siberia, Greenland. These are all pictures I've taken around the Arctic. This is my home. I live in this circumpolar world. I actually grew up in Canada's bit of the Arctic in the Northwest Territories, hence the fancy threads. But this is now what I consider my home, this circumpolar world. And my home, it's not an abstraction, it's a real place, and it's facing some very real threats, mostly driven, as Martin noted, by climate change. So, we're trying internationally and nationally on all sorts of levels to reduce the threat level. But we realize that we have to take another step as well. We can't just concentrate on reducing the threats, because we know that some of the threats that we're already committed to, some of the warming to which we're already committed, is going to cause major changes in the Arctic, major ecological changes. And to counter that, we need to build resilience. We need to ensure that the people of the Arctic, that the systems of the Arctic, that the animals of the Arctic can face up to those threats that are coming to them. So what we're going to tell you now a little more about the ecological implications of this area. We're going to tell you a little more about how we're involving people in the project. We're going to tell you a little more about our role, and then we're going to tell you a little more about what we're doing right now. So first I'm going to introduce Jeff, who's going to lead on some of the ecology.
What's most at risk from the melting ice Clive was talking about is the face of this project, the polar bear. These bears rely on Arctic sea ice to survive. It's simple as that. The ice gives them access to the seals that provide the calories they need to live. Rapid climate change is literally pulling the rug out from under these bears' feet. Like Clive, the Arctic too has been my home. I've lived in Alaska the last 21 years, recent immigrant to Canada. As Martin mentioned, I'm the lead on polar bears for WWF. I'm also a polar bear biologist by trade, and this year marked my 14th consecutive year going out on the sea ice and doing physical research on polar bears. During that time, I've personally seen significant changes in the Arctic, changes that not only threaten polar bears, but other life. And it may surprise you to learn what supports a lot of that other life. It's the sea ice itself. The edges around summer sea ice are incredibly productive, especially over the short summer season. That productivity supports everything from tiny zooplankton to the massive bowhead whale. An entire hidden ecosystem exists under that ice. The same ice provides a platform for ice seals, walrus, and polar bear to access that productivity. One of the best ways I can think of, other than this image, to think about sea ice in the Arctic and it's important is think of it as an upside-down garden. The action's underneath. The ice is the soil. So it's not just replacing a floating dock, it's an actual substrate that fuels productivity in the Arctic. Now clearly, to conserve the Arctic as we know it today, we need global actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But as Clive mentioned, we also know we're committed to a certain degree of warming. It's already likely, and we need to take actions in that regard as well. So we're trying to get out in front of that eventuality. We're trying to get out in front with conservation before some of those opportunities are foreclosed by other activities. And the drivers of some of those activities are one of the other creatures that live in the Arctic that Clive will talk about.
So, who are these creatures? Well, I'm one of them. Play spot the white guy. Yeah, there's lots of people in the Arctic. These are a small but representative sample. There are more than 4 million people in the Arctic. Many of them belong to indigenous communities. And the Arctic is not an empty place. It is lived on, it's lived in, it's used by all of these people. So anything we hope to do there has to include these people, has to include them, it has to include their hopes, their aspirations. This fine gentleman standing here on the Greenland ice sheet is Marco Tedesco, who's a prof at the City University of New York, and we helped sponsor his work on the Greenland ice sheet so he could start to figure out how fast that big chunk of ice is moving and how fast it means that change is coming. So that's one of our roles. We hope to help fill in knowledge gaps about this area. This is one of the least studied areas on the planet. It's very expensive to get to, very hard to get to. We hope to also catalyze discussion about management with governments, with local peoples, with all of the people who really will affect how this area is to be managed in the future. We also intend to continue to raise money for the project and to inform people about the significance and urgency of action in the last ice area. So that's what we see as the WWF role in all of this. So as I've mentioned before, a big part of this role is working with people like this gentleman here. These are the people who live on it. These are the people who use it. These are the people who will have to live with any management decisions that are made about it. Our starting point is that Inuit who live in this area must be involved in any discussions about management. And we've already been taking steps for the last 3 years, very quietly, just making contact, just talking with people when we get the opportunity. Recently, we've stepped that up a bit. We've actually engaged the Inuit Circumpolar Council, which is the international organization that represents Inuit in Canada, in Greenland, in Russia, in Alaska. So they've been working together with us to do some of the outreach to Inuit. But I don't want to give you the wrong impression. We're not just holding meetings about this. We are actually working concretely on the ground as well.
One of the important ways we're building some of these relationships with northern people is we're working on things that matter to them. In this case, learning to live with a lot more polar bears on shore for longer periods of time. So this photo here shows the sometimes glamorous life of a polar bear biologist. I had the chance last year to go up to the hamlet of Arviat along the coast of Hudson Bay and help set up some electric fences with local people to protect their sled dogs from bears, but also to protect bears from getting into trouble with the sled dogs and possibly having a negative outcome there. So these are sometimes the simple and basic steps we must continue to take, is to work with people on things that matter to them. And in this case, also with a strong conservation tie-in. By protecting the people, we're protecting the polar bear, the predator in this case. And we have a strong history of doing this actually globally across large species, but specifically with polar bears. Starting with our Umki patrol work in Russia. Umki is the Chukchi word for polar bear. We've grown interest in these community-based polar bear patrol projects. We're now supporting them actively in Alaska, Canada, and in Russia. We have interest in Greenland, and we're working on a workshop this year in Svalbard, Norway, following some of the episodes they had last summer there. So interest in this area continues to grow, and just to give you an idea, when I say polar bear patrol, what does that mean? What do these guys and gals do? It's basically community members that are acting like rangers around town. They're looking for bear activity. When they find it, they're making sure people are aware that a bear is nearby, and they actively move that bear out of town. How that happens varies greatly depending on where folks are located. The Russians have far fewer tools in their toolbox, so they often employ hunters who are very experienced with animal behavior and who are able to get quite close. And they literally use long sticks to chase bears out of their villages. In Canada and Alaska, we use cracker shells, things like that, to get bears to scoot along, snow machines, quads, whatever it takes in that regard to just escort the bear out of town safely. We also know, as Clive mentioned earlier, we need more information. This is one of the least understood parts of the world, and we're going to have to do things like supporting research like this, but also collecting local knowledge, helping gathering, collect, and publish, disseminate the knowledge of elders, local hunters, and seeing how those two different pieces of information can together inform sound management. We're well placed to lead this effort. You know, again, we're not just armchair experts sitting behind our computers. We're actively in the field. Not just myself, but we have biologists across the Arctic and all of our Arctic range states who are out doing this sort of work in their areas. We also have a strong history, and this is an example of that. This is me when I was still with the U.S. government Polar Bear Research Project being funded by WWF. So WWF-Canada and internationally has a long history of funding some government research and academic research. We have a lot of partners to work with. So this is the urgency and the opportunity that faces us now, to use the best available knowledge, both science and traditional, to figure out where this sea ice will occur and what life it may support. Then we must work with all concerned, all stakeholders, governments and industry, to figure out how we're going to manage this area so that it can still support this life and also the human cultures that have evolved along with that life as long as their stories tell. Finally, we know to achieve this, we're going to have to mobilize and inspire people around the world to take actions both to protect polar bears through reducing their carbon footprint, but also to get involved financially and in other ways. We can't do this alone, and we're very fortunate this year to have a very strong and significant new partner.
Yes, as you can see, we have bitten ourselves off an enormous project here, and we need a lot of help. Luckily, we have, as Jeff says, this year received a lot of help. This partnership with Coca-Cola this year that ran in North America in different campaigns in Canada and the US has given us an awful lot of help. It's helped us reach millions of people that we would not have reached otherwise. And so they can take the message about the significance of what's happening in the Arctic out to entirely new audiences. And more than that, they help us through this campaign to raise the funds that we need to be able to pay for all the work that we have to do for this campaign. So what are we doing now? Well, what we're working on this year is we're going to be working on filling some of those knowledge gaps. That's one of our big challenges, is filling the knowledge gap. So some of the things that we've got in the hopper include refining the ice modeling. We have to have a better handle on exactly where that ice is going to be in the future. We're working with some of the world's best ice modelers to figure those sorts of things out, particularly in Canada's Queen Elizabeth Islands. Remember those high Arctic archipelago islands that you saw on the map earlier? Modelers are not too sure where the ice is going to be in between those islands yet. They figure they have the tools to figure that out, but they need some investment. We're going to put some of that investment in there. Other knowledge gaps that we're talking about filling is actually funding some community-based polar bear denning studies in Nunavut. And we're talking about repeating some work that we did this year through WWF-Canada on tagging narwhals. So we're talking about going up there and doing that again to figure out more about where the narwhals are, what areas they're using, what areas they might use in future. We're working on advancing the management discussions with governments and Northerners, convening people for briefings, and adding capacity to help Northerners take part in those briefings. One of the things that people don't realize often is that there's only so many people up there. I mean, yes, they occupy a large area, but there's not that many of them. And those of them that are there already have 5 or 6 jobs, especially the most capable people. So we have to help them add capacity to take part in these discussions about this future management. We're conducting outreach on the project this year as well. Beyond talking to you right now, some of the things we're planning to do include we're close to, I think, reaching an agreement on taking a sailboat up into the last ice area and being able to better document what it looks like right now and what changes are actually occurring. So we're hoping to take some researchers with us on that trip as well. And we're making plans for more outreach together with Coca-Cola and looking at other partners as well.
So what's the end point? Where does it all lead? Well, for me, the bear guy, this is the end point. It's a healthy, happy polar bear family, symbolizing a healthy Arctic environment and hope for the future. We realize this is a long, large project. We're talking about creating a management regime for an area that's over 500,000 square miles. It's huge. And it won't be easy. But we believe that starting now, and with the help of folks like all of you here tonight, we can do this.